All right, what's up, guys? It's Dr. J, and I am doing this because you asked me to, so hopefully this is helpful for you, and if it is, we will do more of these in the future. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Julia Iafredi. I'm a sports and dance medicine physician at Columbia University Medical Center here in New York City, and I volunteered to the front lines of COVID when it hit in New York in March. And then I almost got deported, and then I went on CNN, and I think that's how most people know my story. And now I'm back working in my normal office for now, but as the numbers continue to tick up, we're having more and more of us get pulled back into the ICU again. And there's been a lot of people asking me questions about what I think about this COVID vaccine. And so even though I'm a sports medicine doctor, obviously I care a lot about everyone's health and wellness too. And so I thought, why not join with me Dr. Alissa McInerney, who is a fellow at Northwell Health System in Allergy and Immunology. So she's like legit one of the experts on this kind of information. And so between the two of us, we are going to explain to you about mRNA, what it is, why we're making a vaccine out of it, and maybe like kind of what's the idea behind it, what's the risk factors, and just try to be as unopinionated as possible and just drop you with some solid knowledge that hopefully you can do something with and make educated decisions that are not based on hearsay and TikTok videos. Okay, so Alissa, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad you came. I'm glad. Thank you. And happy Sunday. Sorry for doing this with me on a Sunday night.
It's okay. It's a pandemic. I mean, what else would we do?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's dive into it. Let's start, and we'll just kind of talk back and forth and see what we can figure out, and if there's something that that we really just can't get to the bottom of, then we can consider doing another one of these in the future. But I'd love to know, you tell me what are your thoughts on the mRNA vaccine. But first of all, what is mRNA? Let's just talk about that first.
Okay, so yeah, mRNA is something that nobody really talks about it when we're talking about what it makes up your genetic code. We're usually talking about DNA. So your genetic code is that double helix DNA that's in the nucleus or the center of the cell. In order to make any proteins or make products of that DNA to make us who we are, we need something called mRNA. So it stands for messenger RNA. So that is actually a code is copied from the DNA, and then that leaves the nucleus and goes into the main part of the cell, the cytoplasm, and that is where all the machinery is. And that machinery is used to make protein products and everything, all of your cells, everything that makes us who we are.
Right. So mRNA, or messenger RNA, like you said, is just this tiny little piece of genetic information that we have. We already have this in our cells, and it's like directions to how to build IKEA furniture, right? Without the directions, we would have no idea how to build the furniture. So it's just directions that we end up being able to translate that can get translated into, let's say, proteins that we need for our body to survive anyways, and then those get excreted from a cell, correct?
Yep.
And can mRNA get into a nucleus?
No.
No, right.
And that is one of the big important things, because people are worried that with mRNA vaccines, that it's going to change your DNA and change your genetic code. And that is something it can't do.
Right.
Because it can't enter the nucleus based on what it is itself. It's not possible.
Right, exactly. So it can't get integrated into our DNA. So it cannot make us have 3 heads. It cannot give us X-ray vision, which would be really cool if it could, but that's not going to happen. And it can't give us, a 17th set of, I don't know, canines or something like that. Like, none of these things can happen. This is all very hearsay and, next level conspiracy theory at its finest. Would you agree?
Yes.
All right. So we have our instruction manual. And so we know that people have been looking at using mRNA for vaccines since like the 1990s, I think. But we've never really used it yet. And why is that?
So it was started in research since the 90s, and they've actually made vaccines that have been used in research, but not in full-blown trials in humans like we do now. They did it initially with, they tried with the Zika virus, they were working on a flu, several different ones. And actually, I believe it was also being looked at for different cancer therapies and things.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why it's still been in the works and it hasn't come out and it's not, you know, one of your normal childhood vaccines quite yet is because mRNA itself is very unstable. So that makes it really tricky in order to actually make it into vaccine and make it still be able to do its job by the time it's injected into your arm. So the point of mRNA is just to translate that message from the DNA to the actual product. So its goal is to only be around for a short time and then quickly be degraded so it doesn't make too much product and so it doesn't interfere with other things. So that's sort of an inherent property of it. And because of that, it's very difficult to get that whole process going and have it still be stable.
Right. So how did we figure out how to stabilize it in this situation?
So there's a couple of different things that we've done. So one of the main things is, so you may hear about something called like naked mRNA versus mRNA that's been modified. So that's just injecting the mRNA by itself. Right. So what the vaccines that we're doing right now, those are mRNA packaged in like a little ball of fats or lipids. And that is what helps it get into the cell and it allows it to stay stable and be able to continue to do its job once it gets in the cell.
Right.
The other thing is viruses and bacteria, their mRNA doesn't do a lot of, we call it post-translational modification. And that's just little minor changes that don't change the actual code, but that they're little modifications like a cap here, a tail here, and those help identify it as human and make it less likely to be degraded because our body isn't going to recognize that it's from a virus or bacteria and that we should get rid of it.
Gotcha. Okay, so it goes into its little like lipid bubble. So I think of it like when you're blowing bubbles, and if you were to blow a bubble like around a little stick or something, that stick would stay encapsulated in the bubble, right? And so then that bubble would fuse with the cell and it would let the stick in through. Would you agree with that? And in order to keep it super stable while we're waiting for that bubble to come with the stick, we put it in a really cold refrigerator or a freezer, right? And so that's why the Pfizer one needs to be at like, what is it, minus 70 or something, or minus 60?
Yeah, minus 70.
Yeah, that's chilly. I'm from Canada. That's really chilly for even for us.
You think about a normal freezer is somewhere around 0 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Moderna one is not quite as cold, but still very chilly. And so that's also helping us to keep it stable. So I think part of why we weren't using mRNA really in humans yet is because we didn't know how to keep it as stable. And we didn't have the money behind it to help with that research, right? We got a ton of money. This Operation Warp Speed happened where it was like, here's a bunch of money, please figure it out. We need a vaccine. And that's not really happened in our lifetimes anyways. And so all of these individuals working on mRNA vaccines all over the world never got to work together before like this. And I think that's been a big part of why this seemed to go through so much faster as well. And the other thing is finding the perfect little antibody target. And we know that we have one of those with the COVID virus because of that stinking little spike protein that we found on the end of it, right? That's something to aim for the mRNA. So why don't you describe how that works?
So we actually, we knew about the spike protein before, right. Because all coronaviruses have this. Corona. Yeah, and so everybody's coronavirus is now becoming like normal daily speak, but it existed for a long time. Like it's on all of our respiratory viral panels, but that's just like sort of the family of coronaviruses. Right. we've had two previous smaller pandemics with coronaviruses. So SARS, the original SARS, and then MERS in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And those were similar coronaviruses, and so they have that spike protein. So when researchers first got a hold of this, they knew what to look for.
Right.
And they took that spike protein and they genotyped it, and they made a copy of what the code is that makes that up. Right. Because we know that spike protein is what attaches to the receptors in the lungs and the nose and wherever, and that is how it gets into the body and into the tissues.
Okay. All right. And so let's talk about the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines and like kind of the main differences between them, because they are both mRNA vaccines, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they are, they're both mRNA vaccines. They're very similar, but they also have some differences. So even in the way that they're given, so both of them are 2 doses. Mm-hmm. The Pfizer is 2 doses 3 weeks apart. Moderna is 2 doses 4 weeks apart. So slightly different how they're given. They're both given intramuscular, so that's the same. That's what most of our vaccines are that you get as an adult, and a large portion that you get as a child. So it's going to be like a shot in the arm. Mm-hmm. They have similar efficacy. I know the exact numbers are slightly different based on exactly what you're talking about, but it's around mid-90s. The big difference that I see as what is going to make a big difference in who gets this is the storage handling, that Pfizer requires this minus 70 degrees Celsius freezer, because those are not found even in our lab. Like there's one, and all of the labs share it. It's very expensive, and also as soon as you take it out of that freezer, it starts to degrade. You have something like a few minutes to get it from the freezer to the person's arm. Okay. So that's tricky. Okay. So hospitals and medical facilities are actually getting these freezers where they're giving the person their shot. Right. Because they have to be in the same vicinity, whereas you can't, tube it up from pharmacy. Right. Yeah. Something like that. Okay. The Moderna still needs to be cold, but it can, for about 30 days, it's okay with refrigeration. Okay. And it just needs to be at minus 20 degrees Celsius or minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit for if long term, like it can stay 6 months at that. Right. So I can foresee that ending up in like a lot of the pharmacies or the bigger pharmacies and some of the other hospitals that maybe can't afford to have quite as fancy of freezers. And then the Pfizer one being at like these big massive academic centers, like my hospital and yours, will probably all be getting the Pfizer vaccine just because it's a little harder to regulate, I suppose. Exactly. And if I know people are worried about third world countries and how other people, so there are other vaccines in the works that probably will be coming out in the next month or two that do not require this. And those are not mRNA vaccines, but made more like a standard vaccine would. Right. Right. Exactly. The AstraZeneca one is one of those ones, right? Yeah. AstraZeneca is similar. And then the Novavax has one. There's a J&J. Yep. So there's a number of them in the works. You're right. Okay, so we know now that the mRNA vaccine is going to instruct our cells to assemble this harmless viral protein, right? And those proteins will then train our immune system to recognize the virus if it comes in contact with it and make antibodies against it. And so we are not introducing, neither of these mRNA vaccines are introducing live or dead virus into your system. So can you get COVID from the mRNA vaccine? No, you cannot. No, you cannot. A resounding no. This is actually really important because that means that a lot more people can get the vaccine. So in my practice, I have a very big immune deficiency cohort. Right. So they can't receive live vaccines because of a problem in the cells of their immune system, but they can receive these vaccines. Right. because there's no live particles or anything in it.
Okay.
And it's really amazing science because it's using your own body's machinery to make this product. You just inject that code and your body's cells help produce that spike protein, and that looks exactly like the spike protein would be before, like when it first enters the cell, when it comes in contact. So your body sees it and immediately recognizes it.
Right, which is super rad, and our bodies are awesome. Okay, so then once the mRNA does its job, just like those furniture instructions, once it's done helping you build your IKEA furniture, and no offense to IKEA furniture, but you know this, we need instructions. There's no way to figure it out otherwise. Once it does its job, those instructions basically get tossed out, never to be seen again. And our body does the same thing with the mRNA. After it does its job and gives you the information to make those proteins, it goes, okay, I'm done, and it denigrates it, it breaks it down, and you'll never see that mRNA particle again, correct?
Yes, you have a lot of different enzymes that break down the mRNA, and they do it very quickly.
Very cool. Okay, and so once we have had those proteins made, those spike proteins, what happens? What does our body do if it does come in contact with the virus?
So your body produces what's called neutralizing antibodies. Mm-hmm. So antibodies are what you get from any vaccine, what you get from when you've been sick. They are these little particles that recognize a specific pathogen, and as soon as they see that pathogen, they go directly to it and they can take care of it. It's in a sense, they're neutralizing that pathogen or that infection. So we are able to, as soon as we see this virus, have a really sophisticated immune response, like as if you had the virus before. And something that's really cool about this is that even people that have had the virus, so a lot of people are saying, well, I'd rather just get the virus. Usually, I'm healthy, it's mild in most healthy people, and then I'll have a good response. But a lot of people are not making a good, durable, or prolonged response from their immune system to this virus particularly.
Right.
And the studies have compared the amount of neutralizing antibodies from people that were given the vaccine to convalescent plasma. So that's people that were sick in the hospital with COVID. And the amount of neutralizing antibodies was significantly higher than those people that were sick.
Okay. So the ones who got the vaccine had way higher antibodies than the ones that had been sick and had mounted an immune response on their own and had leftover antibodies, and their antibodies were, not as great in numbers, right?
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing people get sick twice.
Right. Okay. Which we weren't thinking was going to happen initially, right? We figured you get it, one and done, call it a day. No, not so much. Okay. And not to mention, we don't actually know the long-term effects of COVID, right? Everyone keeps saying, well, I don't know what the long-term effects are of these vaccines. And it's like, well, we don't know the long-term effects of COVID either. These long haulers are dealing with it. In the sports medicine world, we're seeing, myositis, rhabdomyolysis, like all these pulmonary outcomes, like all these illnesses that are coming secondary to COVID, that it's making it hard for them to play sports and be athletic and go back into their normal activities of daily living. And so it's affecting people much longer than just that short respiratory period. And I think people are forgetting that too. So,
and not only that, we're seeing other interesting type of effects that we didn't necessarily realize. So when I was in the COVID units, we saw a lot of, post-extubation, really prolonged sleepiness, delirium, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So we assumed it was related to them being intubated for so long. But now that I'm back in my regular job outpatient, we're seeing a lot of patients that never made it to the hospital that are having neurologic outcomes from COVID. So like forgetfulness, headaches.
Yeah, COVID brain,
exactly.
Yep, I'm seeing it too, even in my clinic, because I see quite a bit of neurology as well. Okay, so then we know that the UK had started giving out the some of the vaccines from Pfizer, and there was some anaphylactoid reactions, and some people were freaking out about it. Do you want to expand on why we should not freak out about those little anaphylaxis?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I've been wearing my immunology hat for a lot of this, but that was when I got to wear my allergist hat. And so the allergy half of my office got very excited about that. So I think a lot of people will agree with me when they say that, the UK was nervous and maybe they jumped the gun a little bit in how they released their recommendations.
Right.
So initially, everybody was really nervous and they said anybody with any serious allergies should not get the COVID vaccine. And I think now we've taken a step back and we look, so they haven't released all of the details still.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
All we know, unless it happened, I haven't really looked today, but unless it happened yesterday. So we just know that 2 people, healthcare workers that had EpiPens already for a history of severe allergic reactions, we don't know to what,
right,
they had an anaphylactoid reaction. So now I'm using that word instead of anaphylaxis because anaphylaxis is very specific definition to fulfill the criteria. And I don't know at this point if it fits because these 2 healthcare workers had a reaction the following day, which is less likely. You can have an anaphylactic reaction up to 24 hours, but it's rare. Normally, anaphylaxis happens within a few hours,
right,
of whatever the insult is. So that itself is rare. Also, we don't know if it's IgE mediated, and that is what would really help us to determine if this was anaphylaxis or not.
Okay. Do you want to explain what IgE mediated would mean? Just for some.
Yes, sorry about that. So there are different types of reactions that you can have. And when we're talking about a true allergic reaction, we always call it an IgE mediated reaction. So that is the molecule in your body that really mediates histamine release from your cells. So everybody knows what an antihistamine is. So when you have, seasonal allergies or different things, you take that to help decrease the histamine. So those type of allergic reactions end up releasing histamine, and that makes you itchy and gives you hives and whatever. Right. You can also have allergic reactions that are cell mediated, which are a little bit different. We're not going to go into that. Those are not anaphylaxis. Right. And you can also have a lot of other reactions that are not actually immunologically mediated, but people can often mistake them for allergy because of how it presents. Although we know that that is just an adverse reaction, and based on testing, we can always tell if it's mediated by the kind of allergic molecules.
Okay. All right. And then what isn't something that, so when they made the vaccines, I know there's a couple other ingredients in it. And there's potential that some people actually have allergic reactions. What is it? Potassium chloride?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. The big thing that that's getting a lot of talk on all the allergy immunology listservs and discussion boards right now is polyethylene glycol.
Ah.
So polyethylene glycol is it's in a lot of vaccines, it's in a lot of medicines, it's sort of like a filler. It helps keep everything together. And it's very rare, but there are people that have true anaphylaxis to this drug. So if anybody knows that they have an allergy to polyethylene glycol, they should not get the mRNA vaccines.
That's fair.
At this point, that is my recommendation and the recommendation of the general allergy community as of now. Okay. Usually we wouldn't expect it to cause anaphylaxis because it's such a small amount, right? But it definitely can. And if people aren't aware of this, if you've ever had Miralax, if you've ever had a colonoscopy, you've had polyethylene glycol.
There you go. Okay. So a lot of people have probably been exposed to it even without knowing it. And if you've had no allergic reaction to it in the past, you're probably absolutely fine. If you're one of those people that has allergic reactions every time you get a vaccine, maybe you are not the person who should be thinking about this mRNA vaccine right this second.
Anybody that has had, anybody that's had anaphylactic reaction to another vaccine should definitely not get it right away and go talk to their allergist about this.
Right. Okay.
But in general, true anaphylaxis to vaccines is it's exceedingly rare.
Right. Okay. So then let's talk about side effects a little bit, because everyone is asking me about side effects. And we know that there's not a lot of long-term side effects. And they're saying, well, we've only been looking at this for like a hot second. They started working on these vaccines like as soon as we had the spike protein kind of found and coded. So since January, they've been working on these, and they have 6 months of data, and they have followed both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. They have at least 3 months post, or at least 2 months, I think it is, post the 2 doses already. And they're still looking at it, right? They haven't just stopped. They're not like, we have emergency use, we're done. No, they're still working. They're still following the data. They're still going to, bring it to the FDA for like normal evaluation. But this is a risk versus benefit, risk mediation situation, saying what's worse, getting this vaccine or potentially getting COVID. And that's why the high risk populations, the healthcare workers, us, or the long-term nursing home patrons are first on the list, because our risk is so much higher right now that any potential downfall that might come from this vaccine is nowhere near as bad as it is from getting COVID itself. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then why do we get some side effects? Why do we get chills and nausea and fever? What is that? Is that us getting COVID?
So that's the whole purpose of the vaccine. And I think this is the biggest misconception that the general public has about vaccines. The reason that you get these kind of vague, sick feeling symptoms is because your body is having an immune response. Your body is creating those antibodies in order to fight this.
It's
and the
working.
only way to do that is exactly. So if you don't, so that's why if somebody's worried about getting this, they're not going to be able to go to work, get it on a Friday if you're off for the weekend, because it's very short-lived. Some people had very mild, and even the amount of systemic side effects were pretty mild. It was just fever, feeling kind of crummy, fatigued for a couple days. So stay in, watch some Netflix, and know that your body is creating these antibodies to fight COVID.
Yeah. I always laugh when, people get the flu vaccine and they're like, I got the flu from the flu vaccine. And I'm like, no, you didn't. You mounted an immune response, which is what you're supposed to do. And some people mount a bigger response, and some people just, mount a similar response and just don't deal with pain the same way, right? But either way, you're getting your body to mount an immune response in an effort to make sure that if you do come in contact with the virus, your body knows how to fight it. So you're not getting COVID from the vaccine. You're not, falling ill from the vaccine. You're just feeling kind of, pardon my language, shitty from the vaccine for a hot second while your body mounts its immune response. That's why we have fever, is to fight, right? Fever is not, yes, it tells you that you might be sick, but fever also tells you that your immune system's working. People that don't mount fevers when they're sick, they're usually immunocompromised because their body's too sick to fight. So fever's okay, right? You'd agree?
Yes. Fever's great.
Fever's super. So and we shouldn't even try to blunt out the fever. So this is something else that they were saying. I know in the trials they offered, if people did have like a little bit of a febrile response, they actually offered them acetaminophen, or Tylenol for those of you who don't know. Which I'm actually surprised they did that, because we kind of want you to have a fever. Granted, you don't want to be at like 104, 105, sure. But to have like a low grade fever, I would actually want that to happen. I'd want to keep that going, because again, we're encouraging that immune response to be as strong as possible.
Yeah, so I trained initially in pediatrics. Mm-hmm. So we hate treating fever just for the sake of fever. Right. If you're really uncomfortable and you're in pain, you don't feel well, you can take Tylenol or whatever to treat that pain and not feeling well.
Sure.
But don't just treat it because you have the fever.
Right. Okay, great. Good. I'm glad we're in agreement on that. The other thing is, so they didn't look really at people that were pregnant. So, and they didn't look at pediatrics, I think under the age of 16, correct? I mean, they started to kind of, but they don't have enough information to make a blanket statement saying that people that are pregnant and people that are younger than 16 should get this vaccine, right? So we're still holding off on that. What about people that are immunocompromised?
So people that are immunocompromised definitely should get the vaccine. But the trick is they really should be talking to their immunologist because depending on what type of problem that they have that's causing their immune compromise. So if they're immune compromised because they are taking steroids for something completely different, that's going to be very different than somebody that has a primary immune deficiency that they were born with.
Like a bubble.
And yes.
All right.
But I'm going to say almost we are going to recommend the vaccine, well, whatever vaccine when has available, we're going to recommend it to almost all of our patients, except for there's a cohort that have certain types of immune deficiencies that we don't want to give it to.
Okay. So basically, if you do have immunocompromise, you should definitely discuss it with your doctor a little bit further. But as a general overarching principle, an mRNA vaccine is probably one of the safer ones for somebody who is immunocompromised because, like we said, you're not actually introducing the virus itself into your system, which is cool. Okay, so then what about durability? How long does this protection last for?
You know, this is like the question that everybody wants the answer to and no one has.
Yeah.
So we don't know.
Right.
We only have that answer as far out as the studies have been.
Right. So 2-3 months we know so far for sure, which is solid still. But we want to, you know, we're hoping we see the 6 months to a year situation. I think it's going to be more like a flu vaccine where you probably have to get it every year. That's kind of what it's looking like to me anyways. But
yeah, I mean,
we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know at this point. That is a possibility, but yeah, we don't know. All I know is that the durability of the vaccine response is significantly better than the durability of the response to natural infection.
Gotcha. And do you have to get both doses?
Yes.
Yes. And why is that?
So with so the way that vaccines work is you sort of you get your immune system to make this response, right, but you have to get the full immune system and you have to get your antibodies as well as your cells involved in order for this immune response. And if you don't have that second response, that second one that we often call the booster, right, you might only have part of that immune system response and not all of that.
Right. Yeah, I read in one of the papers, it said like after the first injection, I think you have like, you know, a 58% efficacy, but it's not until after the second one that you get to that 95% efficacy. So that's a massive difference, right? That's huge. And yeah, I'd be worried that after the first dose, people are like, oh, it made me so sore, it made me feel sick, I don't want to get the second one because it gave me COVID. And so that's why we're doing this. That's why we're educating people, is because we don't want to have a bunch of partially vaccinated people, because they might actually become super spreaders in some ways, because they might think, I don't need to wear the mask because I already got COVID or I got the COVID vaccine. And in fact, they're actually just spreading it worse.
Exactly.
So definitely go through with both doses. Think of it, yeah, like your tetanus booster. I mean, we do boosters all the time. It's very common. This is no different. And then the other thing that we saw, so 95% effective with reducing the risk of COVID. And then I think the efficacy for like severe disease is like basically 100%, right? So even the people that did get COVID didn't get it bad. Nobody got severe COVID. And there were some deaths in the Pfizer trial, right? But it wasn't related to COVID. In fact, there was more deaths in the placebo group than there was in the vaccine group.
Yes, they were actually saying that if some of the, because some were healthcare workers, if they had gotten the vaccine and not the placebo,
right, maybe they
they
would.
might have been saved.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, exactly. So because we don't know for sure. One person had like a myocardial, like a heart attack, which they were in the age group that was expected that they would die from that potentially anyways. Exactly. So yeah.
When you have a big group of people, you expect other random things to happen. And that's another thing, like with the allergic reactions. So we don't know the whole story and all of the specifics, but the way you have to report data, especially in a study, if somebody gets hit by a car and they're in a study, that gets reported as a death in the study.
Right, exactly. Yeah, which, I mean, yeah, exactly. Life happens still.
Exactly. So we have no idea. Like, it could have been some poor guy with a peanut allergy had a peanut butter cookie by accident.
Yeah.
So, we really have to wait for all the details to come out.
Exactly. All right. So when the vaccine comes out, are you going to get it? The second they say,
100%.
So McInerney, you can have it. You're like, I'm in.
Yep.
So
I want one of the mRNA vaccines.
Yeah.
Very much probably just because I'm so excited for science.
I know this is like a science rules situation. Like
this is really like, I can't say at this point, but I really think this is a game changer for medicine.
Yeah.
So I already know. And so especially in my department, I've already told my boss, so only a few of us were redeployed to do the COVID wards.
Yes.
And so he said that we would get first dibs.
Nice. I should go my department with that. I'd be like, I'm on to the front lines. Do I get it?
I mean, we have a very small office, so like I'll be like first in a line of like 5, but still like.
Yeah. I see. I'm like I think our youngest physician in my group, and so they're gonna be like, you can wait. You're healthier than everyone else. Fine. Okay, and then I think there was one other thing. Sorry, I forgot to ask you. So, does it protect only the person who receives the vaccine, or does it also protect them from passing it on to others? Because people are saying, well, after I get the vaccine, do I have to still wear a mask?
Yeah. So this is tricky. We don't know enough.
Right.
At this point.
Right.
We know that it protects the person, but we don't know if it protects you. I mean, eventually it will, but we don't know at what point you have that protection from spreading it to others.
Right.
So everyone still needs to wear a mask until we figure this all out. And not to mention, everybody should just wear a mask anyway. It's not that big of a deal.
No. We wear them for like 13 hours a day at work, right? So
yeah.
It's
even if you have the vaccine and even if we knew that you could not pass it to somebody, just for visibility to everyone around and to show that you care for your fellow human.
Yeah, solidarity. Yep, I totally agree. Because, they're talking about, we're going to have this little passport that says you're vaccinated. What are you going to do? Just walk around holding it and showing people? No, you're not going to do that. So, I live in New York City. You live in New York City. Like, I take the subway to work. Like, if I didn't have a mask on at the subway, people would probably throw things at me. Or they think I was nuts because, there's the odd crazy person. But, all right, fair, valid. Anything else you want to mention? I know there's a website that you really like that I was going to pull up and post. I'm going to share my screen right now to show it, but do you want to kind of talk about this at all?
Yeah, so there's this cool website that has it's like a vaccine tracker of all the different vaccines and where they are. And it's really neat because it tells you exactly where they are for each one. Because initially there was something like 100 different candidates. And so it's really science made to be understandable for the average person. Yeah, it's palatable science. That's what I call it. And that's what our goal is here today. That's what a lot of healthcare workers are doing is like, healthcare workers trying to explain science to you guys to make it easier to understand and not make you have to sift through all this garbage information, as opposed to you just going to the media and reading like very one-sided stories. Like we're trying to be as
unbiased as possible. Like, yes, we're both really excited about this vaccine, but there's a reason we're both excited. And it's not because I'm like, ooh, I want to be like a daredevil and take the vaccine. No, it's because like, this is an incredible scientific marvel. Like, this is a huge deal and we're really excited about it. But yeah, so I like this website a lot that you sent, and I think it's great. So hopefully I sent it to a bunch of my friends to use, and it even talks about, you know, rollouts, how Pfizer's vaccine works, how the Moderna one works. So there's lots to hit on this.
It's science in real time too. I think what's a little scary to a lot of the average American is that we're not used to seeing science in real time. I know even my family, they have never, you know, when a vaccine comes out, it's been tested for years, and you know, this actually seeing everything pan out, this is the scientific method. You know, things fail, then you go back, you do it again. Different trials, you know, they gave somebody the wrong dose of the vaccine and they found out it was better. Like, that's how science actually works.
Exactly.
It's just nobody ever sees that.
Right.
So it can be scary, but I think the fact that what I love about science is that there is data and you can see all of this. So you can see exactly what's happening. So even though it's a little scary, you can see, you know, they're not going to hide anything from you because that data has to back it up.
Right. And for anybody, I mean, the conspiracy theorists out there, I know you're going to do this anyways, but for anybody who's thinking, oh, they're trying to like chip us and put whatever into us and they're trying to like make you grow 6 heads, I'm sorry, but no company in their right mind is going to try to make you hurt, because they will lose money by trying to make you hurt. They will go bankrupt if they give you 6 heads. So rest easy that none of the healthcare workers, none of Big Pharma is trying to give you 6 heads. I promise you. It's funny until it like starts affecting people's well-being, and then you're just like, oh my gosh, no, that's not correct, you know? So yeah, I'm really excited you did this with me. I'm really excited we were able to do this. I hope all of you found this helpful. If you did, great, let us know. We'll do it again if you want. We can talk further down the road. If you're like, this was terrible, I never want to hear about it again, the good news is you don't have to listen. So you're welcome. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was fun and a good learning experience for me too. And hopefully we will we'll see each other in real life eventually soon.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks.
Once we're vaccinated.
Exactly. Vaccines first. All right.